Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today I'm going to be giving my first round grades from the NFL draft. I'll be making a couple other NFL draft related videos talking about some of the biggest winners. We're also going to do my favorite second and third round picks. But for today's video, we're simply looking at the first round. I'm going to grade each pick, kind of compare it to my mock draft. And if you know me, if you're a longtime listener, you know that I can ramble a lot. So I do want to try to make this as quick as possible. Let's see how that plays out. So with the first overall pick, we have Caleb Williams going to the Bears. I gave this an A+. It's a no-brainer. You know, Caleb Williams, we all knew he was going. Generational level talent. Don't really need to spend much time on that. Second overall pick is where the draft really started. This is really where it was up in the air with Washington. Are they going to go Jane Daniels or are they going to go Drake May? You know, for a long, long time, Drake May was the consensus number 2 in this draft. However, he had a rough 2023, had a couple head-scratching performances, and with the emergence of Jane Daniels, especially winning the Heisman, really cemented himself for me as the number 2 prospect. So I give this an A. I think it was the right pick for Washington. I think Daniels simply has higher upside. I think he's a more versatile prospect than Drake May. So for me, definitely the right decision. It's what I had in my mock draft. So with the third overall pick, then the Patriots go ahead and take Drake May. I gave this an A as well. Do I think he's as good as Jane Daniels? I don't see him as that, but they went with best available quarterback, which is exactly what they needed. You know, I heard some other people out there talking about some other scenarios for New England potentially drafting like Marvin Harrison Jr. with this pick. I would have hated that for the Patriots because, you know, it's cool to have Marvin Harrison Jr. It's great to have these elite level, you know, receiver prospects. But if there's no one throwing him the ball, like, what does it matter? You know, it's kind of been like Devontae Adams stuck on the Raiders these past couple of years. Like, yeah, it's great to have a player like that, but if there's no one to throw it to him, who gives a shit? So for me, they made the right decision going with quarterback here. It was by far their biggest need, and I think they addressed that here with Drake May. And he's one of the prospects that I'm really like the most excited to see how he fares in the NFL because, you know, I have bold takes about a lot of these guys, but Drake May, I could really see his career going one way or another. You know, he feels like the most 50-50 guy for me out of all these top prospects. So I gave them an A just because they didn't trade down. They didn't take a receiver. They went with what they needed most, which was a quarterback, and they took the best available quarterback. So for me, that is an A. The fourth overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals, another team that was rumored to be trading down, but they stood still and they picked. And I think they made by far the right decision here. You know, we talked about this in my mock draft. I was like, for Kyler's sake, please don't trade down. Just take Marvin Harrison Jr., and they did just that, and it gets me an A. He was the best receiver prospect in this class. They're clearly lacking a big playmaker for Kyler to throw to, so for me, this was an incredible pick. 5. Now, this is where things get weird because the first 4 picks I predicted right in my mock draft. This is really where the whole draft gets thrown off with the Chargers at 5 because I had them taking Malik Neighbors. I think a lot of people thought they were going to go receiver, and I get it. I knew going into this, Harbaugh does not prioritize receiver. That being said, I was like, look at your wide receiver room right now. Your number 1 option is Quentin Johnston. You have a guy in Malik Neighbors who can legit, like, has the talent, has the upside to be a top 10 wide receiver in this NFL. So for me, I was like, he's just too good of a prospect to pass on. I get it. It's not in Harbaugh's MO, but sometimes the player just outweighs, you know, the philosophy. And I thought that was the case with Neighbors here. And they ended up going with Joe Alt. Joe Alt is definitely the top O-lineman in this class. So I gave it a B+ because you got a really good player in Joe Alt. But for me, I would have taken Malik Neighbors. Now, they did address it later down, like we're going to talk about in my second round video. They grabbed Ladd McConkey in the second round, which I actually really like that pick for them. We won't get in that now, but the Joe Alt pick, it's a good pick. Probably not the one I would have made. I give it a B+ because they got the top O-lineman, starting to build that line up to protect Herbert. And we know Harbaugh puts a big priority on running the ball, so he wants to build up that line. The pick makes sense. It's just probably not what I would have done. With the 6th overall pick, the Giants took Malik Neighbors, so I had them going receiver in my mock drafts. I had them taking Rome Odunze because I didn't think Neighbors would still be on the board by 6. Like I said, I thought he was going to the Chargers. So the Giants getting him. it's a weird situation because it's an A pick because Malik Neighbors has such high upside. But it's like I just talked about, like if Marvin Harrison Jr. would have went to the Patriots, it's cool to have a great receiver, but if there's no one there to throw him the ball, really, who cares? So I feel like the Giants, they're kind of stuck in that mold now. And this is really the last chance I think Daniel Jones has to salvage his NFL career because he now has a legit number one option. The common argument I've heard in favor of Daniel Jones has been, well, he's never played with a number one receiver level talent in his entire career. Well, you got that now in Malik Neighbors, who is clearly, like I just said, has top 10 receiver in the NFL level upside. So there's no excuse now. Daniel Jones, I already would have wanted to move off him. The contract kind of makes that impossible. So just given their situation, maybe a trade down, I don't know. The Giants are such a fucking mess. But for me, they just went with the best player available. I give it an A. 7. We get our first big reach of the draft for me, and that is the Tennessee Titans drafting J.C. Latham. In my opinion, they probably on their board thought that they were getting Joe Alt. Like a lot of us had the Titans landing Joe Alt. They probably thought they were going to get Joe Alt, and as soon as he goes off the board, I think they just fucking panicked and went with J.C. Latham. Not to say that Latham is bad or I think he's going to suck or anything, but the value isn't here to take J.C. Latham. You know, J.C. Latham was projected to be like a late first-round pick. So to take him at 7 for me feels like a big-time reach. I feel like there were honestly better O-linemen still on the draft board ahead of Latham. You know, I would have taken Fuaga. I would have taken Fatanu. Like, for me, there were just other guys that I think are better prospects. So I give this one a C. Feels like a reach. Number 8, this is the biggest shock surprise of the first round, and that is the Atlanta Falcons drafting Michael Penix Jr. I gave this a D. I really like Michael Penix Jr. as a prospect. I really like him. I think I'm higher on Michael Penix Jr. than most people are. You know, everyone wants to bring up the injury concerns. I think it's one of the most overstated things about him as a prospect because he's played 2 healthy years. Him as a prospect is not why this is a D. It's simply a D because the pick literally makes no fucking sense for the Atlanta Falcons, who are in a win-now mode, you know? And you can tell me all you want. You know, I had people saying in my comments after I reacted to it, like, oh, well, this team isn't win-now anyways, so you might as well grab your quarterback of the future. That makes no sense because the Atlanta Falcons, they're in a very winnable division. And anytime you can simply make the playoffs, you got a shot. You know, I think back to the Eli Manning Giants. Like, they were never favorited in either of their Super Bowl runs, yet they just got hot. They got in the playoffs. They went on a run. That's, for me, for the Atlanta Falcons, I kind of think of that in that mold. Like, if they get in, they're going to have a puncher's chance. If Kirk Cousins is able to stay healthy, which is kind of a big ask at this point, just knowing what he went through last year. But if he stays healthy, this team can easily win 12 games for the next 2 years. And for me, you might as well add to that roster you have now. It's already a really good roster, but there was a clear need on this team. There was a number one glaring hole on this team, and that's the pass rush for the Atlanta Falcons needed a lot of help. And they could have easily added here at 8, or they could have even traded down and got more value. You know, it took a while for the pass rushers to start going off the board. So for me, it's like, why wouldn't you just take a pass rusher here? And even if you wanted Michael Penix, you could have traded down as well. Some people didn't even think he was going to go in the first round. Now, I didn't believe any of that. I thought he was going to, there's no way he was going to fall past the Raiders at 13, but still to take him at 8, I think it's a terrible pick for the Falcons, who are a team who can compete right now, could have used a win-now player instead of a guy who's going to be sitting on the bench for the next 2 or 3 years. And again, I hate to say all this negativity because I really like Penix. It's just the pick at 8 makes no sense whatsoever, and I think you have to do like mental gymnastics, mental jujitsu to really justify this pick because it makes no sense. So I give it a D. 9 overall. The Bears take Rome Odunze, A+ for me, definitely, because I didn't think he'd still be on the board. The fact that they got him now, it shows that they now have 3 legit number 1 receivers in Chicago. And if you're Justin Fields, you got to be pissed because look at the team Caleb Williams now has. Like, this team if they won 10 games, it would not be a surprise whatsoever when you look at the high-end talent that they have, and Rome Odunze just adds to that. He is a superstar level receiver, big-time playmaker. So for me, that's an easy A+. Next, we get the 10th overall pick. The Minnesota Vikings move up just one spot to draft J.J. McCarthy. I give them a B. If you've listened to me, I'm not the biggest fan of J.J. McCarthy as a prospect. I think we just don't know enough about his game. He wasn't really asked to do much at Michigan. I called him the Mac Jones 2.0, so it's really up in the air with him, but he's going to probably the best situation outside of the Bears in terms of the offensive personnel of these quarterbacks. He has Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, a really good young head coach who's offensive-minded, and Kevin O'Connell. They just got Aaron Jones, the running back. There's a lot here to work with for J.J. McCarthy to succeed. I think if he would have went to a team like the Patriots or a team like the Giants, his career would have been a disaster. But now he's going to an incredible landing spot in Minnesota, and they only had to move up one pick. It was rumored they wanted to maybe move up to 4 or 5. They only had to move up one spot to get their guy. I like the fact that they addressed quarterback and then just roll into next year with Sam Darnold, who sucks. So for me, I give that a B because I'm not sold on him as a prospect, but I'm glad that they went with quarterback here. And they only had to move up the one spot, like I said. So B. For the 11th overall pick, the Jets moved down one spot to draft Olu Fashanu. And that's kind of ironic because I did 3 mock drafts leading up to this draft. And the first 2 mock drafts, I had the Jets taking Olu Fashanu. I changed it in my final one where I had them taking Brock Bowers. But yeah, the only reason I was like, maybe they won't go him, Fashanu, is because I felt like they already kind of short-term addressed their offensive line issues with Morgan Moses and with Tyron Smith. I was like, well, their window's really a year, maybe 2, depending on how Aaron looks. So it's you might as well just go all in on this team. And for me, the pick of Fashanu feels more like a long-term pick. So I think it's the right move because I don't trust the health of Tyron Smith. That's been one of the biggest issues for him for years now. So I like the pick. I'll give it a B+. You could argue taking Bowers here would have made more sense, just the fact that they're in a win now mode, but Fashanu makes a ton of sense. Number 12, the Denver Broncos took Bo Nix. This is one of the craziest picks to me because I am just not sold on Bo Nix whatsoever as a prospect. And to see him go with the 12th pick for me is fucking insanity. And similar to my rationale with the Vikings, I'm going to give it a C. Not that because I like Bo Nix as a prospect, but simply for the fact that they addressed their biggest position of need, which is quarterback, because you can't roll into next year with Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson as your quarterback. So for me, I like the fact that they took quarterback. It's just the value at 12. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense. I feel like you could have got Bo Nix a lot later. Some people, actually a lot of people, didn't even have him being a first-round pick. I thought that was kind of silly. I had him going in my mock draft. I had him going to the Raiders at 13. So I saw him as a first-round guy. It's just when I see the reaction to, all these quote-unquote draft experts, they were all shocked by this. Nobody really in those NFL circles thought he was going to be a first-round pick, and the fact that he went 12 is kind of crazy. But like I said, I like that they took a quarterback, so C. 13, the Raiders take Brock Bowers, So I wanted them to get a quarterback. I really did because there's some nice pieces on this team. You get a good quarterback in there, the Raiders could make some noise. But at this point in time in the draft, 6 of them just went. So 6 quarterbacks went in the top 12. The next quarterback didn't go till the 5th round with Spencer Rattler. So there just wasn't a quarterback on the board for the Raiders to take. So I think they just went simply with the best available prospect, and that was Brock Bowers. So I give them an A. You could definitely argue me, you could convince me that they could have went with some other positional guys here, whether it's O-line, D-line, corner. They're a team that definitely needs a lot of work. But I think they simply just went with the best prospect available in Brock Bowers, and they couldn't pass up on it. I give it an A, just for the fact that you could argue he is simply, talent-wise, the best prospect in this class, and they got him at 13. 14, The Saints took Talise Fuaga, or Fuanga. I don't know how it's pronounced, Fuaga or Fuanga. But either way, I think it's a really good pick, and in my final mock draft, I had them taking Olu Fashanu at this spot. Obviously, he's off the board, so they go with the next best guy in Fuanga. And some people actually think that he's going to be better than Fashanu. So I'm interested to see that. It's definitely a massive position of need, knowing that, their O-line's really banged up, especially Ryan Ramczyk, his knees are just shot. So I really like this pick. I give it a B+. 15 is the Colts. They went with Latu. Again, you guys are going to have to tell me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Again, this is another guy where, similar to Michael Penix, he has the injury issues because he was basically told he would have to medically retire due to a neck injury. So that is why he wasn't as hyped up as a prospect, because the numbers in the eye test, I think, speak for itself in terms of him being one of the best defensive guys in this class. It was the reason why he wasn't like a top 10 level pick is the injury concerns. So for me, similar to Michael Penix, he's played 2 years of healthy football. So for me, that kind of goes away. I think he's proven he can stay healthy. For me, he's still, though, not the number one defensive guy, which is why I can't give this a higher grade. I gave him a B+ because of the massive upside that this guy has. And it could have been an A, but like I said, I just think that there were a couple better defensive prospects still on the board at this point. 16 is Byron Murphy, the second, going to the Seattle Seahawks. I really like this pick because they addressed their biggest position of need, which is pass rush. Their pass rush has been lacking. That's probably the biggest hole on the Seahawks roster. So I'm glad that they went out and got a pass rusher with Byron Murphy. I'm trying to think. I think I had them taking Latu in my final mock draft, so it's kind of interesting how close that was. So I gave that a B. I like that pick a lot. 17, the Minnesota Vikings trade up from the 23rd pick to 17 to land Dallas Turner. This, for me, is probably the steal of the first round. A+, because for me, Dallas Turner is the best defensive prospect in this class. Should have went at number 8 to Atlanta, but he falls all the way down to 17 to go to Minnesota, a team that just lost their best pass rusher by far in Danielle Hunter, who just had 16.5 sacks. Their defense was already struggling, and then you lose that guy. So I like the fact that they went out there and addressed that loss with the best defensive prospect in this class. It's 17, A+ for me. 18, the Bengals took Amarius Mims, who has extremely high upside. The only problem with him as a prospect is he only played 8 games. So it's a very, very small sample size. But the height of this guy, this man is a fucking mountain of a man. He is a monster. So the Bengals just seem to have some sort of obsession with massive offensive linemen, because you look at Orlando Brown and Trent Brown, they're two current tackles. Maybe that's another reason why you could say this pick makes sense, is because Amarius Mims doesn't have to be a day one starter, because they already have 2 starting level tackles with the guys I just said. So maybe he can sit for a year or 2. So, maybe this is more of a long-term play. We know that they've really been plagued by their offensive line issues. It's led to Burrow getting injuries. So it makes sense to go with him here. But again, I do think, just in terms of win now, I think there are better NFL day one starters than Amarius Mims. But given the upside, I think it's good. So I gave it a C+. You can maybe say a little higher. 19, the Rams go with Jared Verse. I give this a B. They obviously lost Aaron Donald this year from retirement. So they're trying to recoup some of that value in terms of their pass rush. And Jared Verse, another guy that some people thought could maybe be a top 10 pick. Some people thought Jared Verse might actually be the best defensive prospect in this class over Dallas Turner. So I think it's really good value to get him at 19, especially whenever it's a position that has a massive hole now that Aaron Donald is gone. So I give it a B. 20, my team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, we took Troy Fautanu, and I initially put out that reaction to it where I was saying I was pretty disappointed. And in the moment, I was kind of disappointed by this pick, because for me, I think it just comes down to the fact that taking an O-lineman is kind of boring. We really doubled down on that because the second round we went with another O-lineman. We'll talk about that in the other video. But I think the more time that's gone on, I've come around to this pick more. I really wanted either Brian Thomas Jr. or Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold. Those were the guys that I really, really wanted for the Steelers, and we ended up going with Fautanu, which now that I think of it, makes a lot of sense. When you look at how dog shit our offensive line has been for years now, we went with the first overall pick last year, or our first round pick with Broderick Jones, and now we doubled down on it this year with getting Fautanu. So they're really starting to put together a really nice offensive line. They've got some really high-end draft capital invested in that offensive line with Broderick Jones, with Fautanu, and with Frazier, who we got in the second round. So they're really building that up. We know Artie Smith likes to run the ball a lot. You got to have a big, stable offensive line for that. It makes sense. I've kind of come around on it more. I still, again, I will argue with anyone, I still probably would have preferred those other guys I said, but I'm not as down on it as I was initially. So I'll give it a B. 21, the Miami Dolphins took Chop Robinson. Okay, so for me, this is another reach because I looked at probably 8,000 mock drafts before this draft happened. I listened to all the, whatever you want to call the experts. I know that's kind of a joke to call them experts because they're fucking wrong all the time. But I very rarely saw Chop Robinson going in the first round. So this, for me, does feel like a reach. Chop Robinson is definitely, they call him a one-trick pony because he's terrible in the run game. He's almost unplayable in terms of his lack of, run stuffing. But as just a pure pass rusher, he's incredible. He has extremely high upside as a pass rusher. I think you can develop the run stuff as well. And really, they don't need that. They need pass rush. That's ultimately what they need. They went with that with Chop Robinson. So I get it why they did it, but it's just not the person I would have taken. For me, there were still better pass rushers on the board. So I give it a C-. For me, it feels like a bit of a reach. At 22, the Philadelphia Eagles drafted Quinyon Mitchell. For me, this is an A+. This is one of my favorite picks of the first round. And for me, the Eagles were one of the biggest winners of the first round for this pick alone. They got the best corner prospect in the draft at 22. They didn't have to trade up, and corner is by far the Eagles' biggest position of need, and they even doubled down on it with getting Cooper DeJean in the second round. But for this pick alone, I love this pick. I think this is, like I said, one of the best of the first round. The fact that you got the top corner prospect addressing your biggest need. 23, so Jacksonville, they moved down with the Vikings trade, and they take Brian Thomas Jr., a guy I really, really wanted to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Didn't play out. He's in Jacksonville now. I give it an A. You look at their receiver room is kind of okay. Christian Kirk goes back to being the number one now that Calvin Ridley leaves. They brought in Gabe Davis. I'm not a big fan of Gabe Davis. So I think BTJ, for me, has superstar potential. So to land him here at 23, I think is really, really great value for the Jags. I give that an A. 24, the Lions moved up a couple spots to draft Terrion Arnold. Again, this for me is another A, 100%, because you could even argue Terrion Arnold is the number one corner in this class. I would go Quinyon Mitchell, but if you say Terrion Arnold, I'm not really going to argue with you that much. That for me, they're very similar in terms of their upside. So Terrion Arnold to the Lions, again, similar to the Eagles, they're a team where they're a really talented team, but their secondary is by far their biggest need, and they address that here. I give it an A. 25, Green Bay takes Jordan Morgan. I give it an F because I honestly don't know who the fuck Jordan Morgan is. I do not know. I've never heard his name before the Packers drafted him. So I don't know. I think that's the worst pick of the first round, F, because I don't know who the fuck that is. And if your rationale is they want to go O-lineman, there were far, far better offensive lineman prospects on the board. I don't know what the fuck the Packers were doing with this one. 26, Tampa Bay, Graham Barton center. Makes a ton of sense. Jensen just retired, and a big piece of the Buccaneers over the past couple of years has been their really good offensive line. Dealt with a lot of injuries. Getting Graham Barton in the first round, I think, makes a ton of sense. You just instantly replace Jensen. I give it a B. 27, Arizona takes Darius Robinson. Definitely a big position of need. They need a big-time help on their D-line, so I give it a C+. I like that they went after a position of need, but Don't know a ton about Darius Robinson. 28, the Chiefs traded up. I can't believe the Bills, of all teams, would do a trade with the Chiefs to let the Chiefs jump up and grab a guy. For me, is insane. When you look at how many times the Bills have lost to the Chiefs, the fact that they would trade down and let the Chiefs draft a receiver, for me, absolutely not. I'm doing that. But the Chiefs, they trade up and they take Xavier Worthy. There, for me, were just simply better receiver prospects on the board. I get it. He's really fast, but there were better all-around receiver prospects, in my opinion, that went in the second round, especially like Ladd McConkey. Even his Texas teammate, Adonai Mitchell, I think is a better prospect than Xavier Worthy. So I give it a C. I like that they went receiver, but there were better receivers on the board for me than Worthy. 29, Dallas, who had moved down. I'm pretty sure that was with Detroit. So now Dallas, I guess, is the 29th best team from this past year. They're not the 24th best team. They're now the 29th best team, and they take Tyler Guyton. I give it a B-. I like him a lot as a prospect. We'll see how it plays out. And the pick makes sense for Dallas. Losing Tyron Smith, the O-line has always been a signature, a mainstay of the Cowboys under Dak Prescott. So actually, I'll move it up to a B because it makes a lot of sense. 30 is Baltimore, taking Nate Wiggins. I think they just simply went with best available player at this point because corner, it's not like the biggest need for the Ravens, but the fact that he was still on the board at 30, I think they saw him and they were like, he's still here. He's our highest rated prospect and he's still available here at 30. So I give it a B+. I think Nate Wiggins, he's another guy you can argue could be the best corner in this prospect. I think this is a really good corner draft. And Nate Wiggins, again, he's another guy. He's right up there with Quinion. He's right up there with Terrion Arnold in terms of being CB1 in this draft. So the fact the Ravens got him at 30, the potential he has as like that in the mold of like a Sauce Gardner, just a complete shutdown corner, I give it a B+ for Baltimore. 31, the Niners draft Ricky Pearsall. I've never heard his name before this draft. I never heard of Ricky Pearsall. So I give it a C-. I know receiver makes sense to go with the 49ers because they've been having a lot of rumors in terms of Brandon Ayuk. Is he going to be around or not? But for me, offensive line was by far and away the Niners' biggest need, and they go with an unknown receiver for me, C-. Then the last pick, Carolina jumps back up, gets Xavier Legette with the last pick in the draft. I give it a B-. Again, for me personally, I still think there were a couple better receiver prospects, but I like the fact that they're trying to get weapons for Bryce Young. So that's been all my first round grades. You let me know down in the comments what you think. Did you like your team's selection? Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.